Hello and welcome to This Week in Property. I'm your host Richard Swan, and in today's show, this gentleman that you can see on the screen if you're watching the video edition, of course, is Mr. Chris Miles. Now, Chris, first of all, welcome and thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, appreciate having me on today.
And we're both praying that your voice is going to hold up, aren't we? Because you've been a busy man. You're a fellow podcaster yourself. Let's get a plug in straight away. Is it Money Ripples? Is that the one that you're still doing just now?
That's correct. MoneyRipples.com. Also the Money Ripples channel on YouTube.
Tremendous. There we go. So this man's voice is well worked, I'll tell you that. But who is this man? What on earth is going on, Richard? Why do you have him on the show? Just to talk about podcasts? No, 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 no. This man has a wealth of experience in the worlds of finance and money matters and investing. He's sometimes been called by people a cash flow expert, sometimes called a passive income expert. You can argue if they're both similar or not, but also a nice little title. He's known as an yes, I'll repeat that, an anti-financial advisor. And I'm sure we're going to uncover the magic behind that. So Chris, I mean, if someone met you for the first time, you know, the typical cocktail party, you might get over the pond. I know that's what a lot of you guys and girls do over there. How is it you would give a brief summary of your background, you know, that's taken you to this stage in your life?
You bet. So I wasn't really trained about money and investing growing up. All I was trained was that there was never enough of it and that you should save everything, right? I was raised with phrases from my parents, things like, hey, we can't afford this. What do you think? Money grows on trees? I'm not made of money, you know. Those are the kind of phrases I always heard growing up.
Yeah.
So I vowed that I never want to be like that. After college or during college, I decided I want to become an entrepreneur, but I wasn't sure what to do with my life. And so I actually dropped out of college. I was going to take a quick sabbatical. And I thought, well, let's find some business to be a part of to gain some real life experience. Well, as I did that, becoming a financial advisor was the first thing that came up. And I thought, well, this is great. Become a financial advisor would be wonderful. Let's try it out. Worst case, I learned about money. Long story short, I dropped out of college. I never went back to finish my degree. And I stayed as an entrepreneur. I did financial advising for 4 years.
Right.
And about 4 years in, my own father said, when are you going to advise me? Now, my dad, he's the kind of guy that never wanted to share his money, right? He's the kind of guy that would never let us know how much money he had because he was afraid that everybody wanted to take his money. So I sat down with him and I knew he was a cheap son of a gun, right? Very cheap, miserly kind of person. And he paid off all of his house. He was completely 100% debt free. He had stuffed money into his retirement plans for decades. He's 61 years old. He says, Chris, I want to retire today. How do I do it? I looked at his numbers and I said, Dad, if you want to retire today, you better hope you die in 5 years because that's when you're going to run out of money.
Wow.
He said, well, that's not what I wanted to hear. What's the answer? What can I do? And I said, I don't know. You did everything right, according to what I teach as a financial advisor. That bothered me because part of what inspired me to become a financial advisor was him, because he would always say things, and in addition to saying he can't afford it, he would say things like work would literally kill him. He'll never stop working. And so I wanted to stop that. And despite all the dreams that I sold people that if they saved in their retirement plans for years and years, they'll be financially free. And here he is, evidence that it doesn't work. And so when the student's ready, the teacher appears. A few weeks later, I'm speaking with one of my friends who I trained to be a financial advisor, but then he left to go do real estate investing. And I thought maybe he was going broke as a real estate investor. Completely opposite. He said, man, I've been partnering on deals with my dad, and my dad has already doubled his income at the private university nearby. I said, that's too good to be true. You've just been investing for five months. How is that even possible? He said, Chris, how many of your clients are really financially free where they don't worry about money? Well, none. Okay, Chris, how about this? How many of you as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these mutual fund investments? And as I thought about it, I said, man, there's guys been working here since the late 1970s and they can't retire either. Yeah. And so I said, well, maybe none. There's your problem. And so that got me down a journey, down a path to where I started learning about real estate investing, to the point where later that next year, after I quit being a financial advisor, vowed never to teach about money again, I went to go do real estate investing. Later that next year, I was able to retire when I was 28 years old. I had enough money coming in that I didn't have to keep working anymore. And that blew my mind that that was even possible, considering that I thought if I were lucky, if I saved up enough and I was a cheap enough person, then I could save my way to retire by the time I'm 40 or 50 years old. And here I am in my late 20s, able to retire. And that's what changed everything. Eventually, people asked me, how did I do it? So I came out of retirement in 2007 to teach people to do exactly that. How do we create passive income? So you work because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. You know, there's so much there in that short history, that short summary, at least I should say, that we can unpack and dive into, and I'm sure we're going to be doing that. It must be. I felt your emotion when you were talking about that moment with your father, because that's not a client, that's your own dad, and you're having to look at him in the eye and say, "I'm sorry, but we're running the numbers here. You've got 5 years." I mean, that's such a powerful milestone in your own personal life.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And you also mentioned you kind of tripped over the little phrases there about, spending, 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 and then him being so tight, being so tight in the money, being a cheapskate, all this kind of stuff. And that seems to be, repeated so often by the financial advisor, not the anti-financial advisor, which you are, of course, is. It's simple. You just save, 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 and you cut down on all the lattes. You just pull your tight belt, and that's all you need to do. Do the saving, do the cutting of the costs, and everything's going to be fine. Why is that in your mind so fundamentally wrong? Why is it not good enough?
Yeah, you hear a lot of that kind of stuff, especially here in the United States. You got the latte factor, right? Like
Yeah,
David Bach saying, cut out those lattes. And you got a guy named Dave Ramsey who says that all
yeah,
debt's evil and basically you should just throw your money away in the stock market, even though he doesn't do that himself, right?
yeah.
And so, those kind of things I just don't believe in. I think you should be able to enjoy life because the truth
Mm,
is we don't know how long we have on this planet.
yeah,
So for you to defer and do like what my dad did, just save and defer your life for someday, well, you never know if that someday will ever happen. And I'll tell
exactly.
you, in my dad's life, he thought that he would die because he was heavy smoker since the Vietnam War. He had, he ate whatever he wanted to. He ate fast food and everything else. And he's still alive to this day, almost 80 years old. He cannot die. The guy is just invincible. And so if you could imagine, like he had to work until he was in his 70s, and even then he was forced out of work due to health issues, and now he's alive, but he's not living. Do you
Right.
understand that difference? Like that's
Mm,
the key thing. And so I'm not saying don't be a wise steward of your money. It's good to be a wise steward. Watch the
mm,
money. Make sure you're tracking your money. What's coming in, what's going out. Be sure you're careful with what you're spending,
yeah,
but don't do it at the expense of destroying your entire life and destroying every relationship you have.
yeah,
That's not wealth. That's not living. Focus on where you prioritize to put your money. Where are the things that you value? Put your money there. Yes, do save, but don't just save and sock it away in something like the stock market, which we have zero control over. And really, it's high risk, mediocre returns. That's just a dangerous way to use your money, and it'll keep you broke and stuck for much of your life.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Two words coming out of some of the stuff I'm hearing from you. I love hearing how you're talking. I can just pick at some of the threads and we can go off on a tangent. Debt and economy, because you mentioned about debt and you mentioned about some people, oh, all debt is bad, and the kind of nonsense on that part. You also mentioned earlier on with your little summary about the year 2007. My goodness, that went into a very particular time in the economy, as we all know, across the entire planet. You really specialize in helping entrepreneurs, business owners, investors to succeed, but not just succeed just now when everything's great. You particularly manage to do it through really troubling times when the economy is up and down and everything. So part of your story, you can actually talk, I believe, about £1 million worth of, sorry, $1 million worth of debt. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So you think my rise, to meteoric, type of wealth and prosperity happened after 2007? Well, of course, in 2007, 2008, we started to see the collapse of banks like Bear
Yeah.
Stearns and all these banks collapsing and the housing market tumbling. And that affected me too, because
Mm,
I started to become prideful. I started to become a little bit too arrogant. The arrogance of my 20s caught up to me in my 30s. And as a result, of course, I found myself, not just with real estate, but in 2007, I came out of retirement to start a business with some people. And of course, the market starts tanking. We were focusing only on real estate investors that we were educating.
Mm.
So our business was tanking. My own real estate was starting to tank. So everything was going downhill. And it got to the point where I was about $1 million in debt. And about, to be even more specific, I was short about $15,000 a month, meaning that my income between my business and my personal revenue was $15,000 a month less than my expenses between the business and the personal life.
Wow.
And so it was a very desperate situation. I didn't file for bankruptcy, although in hindsight, maybe it would have been easier to do so because it would have been nice to wipe out that debt and just start over.
Mm.
But I'm stubborn and I don't like to give up. So as a result, I said, nope, I'm not filing for bankruptcy. I'm going to pay back this debt one way or the other. But I had no money, no credit. I couldn't invest, even though that would have been the best time to get into real estate during that time.
Mm.
I had no money to do that. So I had to dig out of that hole. And I realized that everything's about stewardship, right? Here's the thing about debt. Debt in and of itself is not good nor bad,
Mm-hmm.
because debt is really about the person that uses it. If you're a spender, debt is always bad, right? If you need Spendaholics Anonymous to help you through your 12-step program, yes, debt is always bad for you. Never get it.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you're a hyper conservative ultra saver, where even the mentioning of debt freaks you out, it's not good for you either. The
Yeah.
only thing that debt is good for is for a wise steward. See, stewards, they're the best investors
Mm.
because stewards realize that money is meant to be used, because if you don't use it when you're alive, somebody else will when you're
Yeah.
dead, right? So money is meant to be used, but it's meant to increase and grow and to bless others' lives.
Yeah.
How you go about doing that is really up to you. But making your stewardship, you want to multiply things, you want to improve upon things. That's what a steward does. So when you have debt, you know that you don't fear it, but you do respect it.
Mm.
And so you use debt in a way to help you get a leg up. But again, you're wise with it. And that's the key difference. So for me, although, like, I'll tell you, even if I was debt free, always the critics will always say, well, it's the debt that caused all your problems in the recession. No, it wasn't. It didn't help. But even if I were debt free, I was still in the hole every month
Mm.
because of, just the normal business expenses, and our business was tanking fast. So that's not it. It's not just about the debt, but I realize this is that when I was trying to decide, when the money I was making for my business, where do I use it? Do I invest it or do I pay off debt? Well, I created a formula to figure out which is better. And so I call it the cash flow index. And I was actually playing, if you guys ever played the game Cash Flow, right? That Robert
Yeah.
Kiyosaki created.
Yeah.
There's obviously the online, or the it used to be the CDs that you had,
That's
right?
right. That's
CD.
right. That's right.
So I would start playing Cash Flow 202 because you can go bankrupt more easily in that game. So I was playing the more advanced game. And I realized that debt is kind of like an investment, because if you pay off a debt, it frees up X amount of dollars of cash flow. So the
Mm.
question is this: is the investment going to make you more cash flow or paying off the debt? And so I created this cash flow index to make it simpler for other people rather than calculate ROI. I would say this is: you take the debt, the balance of the loan,
Mm-hmm.
divide it by the minimum monthly payment, and you'll get that index. The lower the number, the more you want to pay it off. Because essentially, the lower
Ah.
the number, the higher the ROI. So let me give you an example. Say that you have a $10,000 car loan that you pay $500 a month on. Low interest, it's great interest wise, but it's a high payment.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have a $10,000 credit card that's $200 a month with high interest. Here, pause for a second. Get my voice back. So between those two, most people, the savers will tell you pay off the credit card.
Right.
However, from a cash flow standpoint, the one, if all you had was $10,000, the one that's best to pay off is the car loan, despite the interest rate. And this challenges people's beliefs. But I'll tell you from firsthand experience, plus other hundreds of clients we worked with, the stress doesn't come from the balance of the loan, it comes from the payment.
Mm.
So if you
Yeah.
can get rid of the payment, that helps free up your mind. It frees up your situation, your cash flow to do
Mm.
more things. And so if you pay off that car loan instead, which is an index of 20, because 10,000 divided by 500 is 20,
Mm-hmm.
that's better than paying off the credit card. 10,000 divided by 200 is 50. Go for the lowest one first. That'll give you the best ROI on your cash, the best rate of return. In fact, not only is it a good rate of return, but it's guaranteed. You know exactly what you're going to free up. Where in real estate, we don't always know the ROI. Like we kind of know, but we're guessing to some level, right?
Yeah.
Here we know it. And so I started paying off my debts. Instead of investing, I started paying off certain debts. Other debts I left alone. If they had a high number, especially if it was over 100, I didn't
Mm.
mess with them. You know, mortgages, I left mortgages alone. Now, if a mortgage was lower than that, I would tell people, let's refinance. Let's refinance that loan. And especially when there's equity, we could refinance that loan to pay off some of these other debts and do that. So, to give you an example, I had one client where they had money in a retirement account, $500,000 sitting there, a half a million. And they said, well, I got to retire. They were in their 60s, they were burning out in their business. And I said, well, let's do this. Let's refinance your mortgage, cash out some money, and then use that money to then pay off some of these specific loans, these lower index numbers.
Mm.
I said, if you do this, you will free up $50,000 a year. So and in fact, what we'll have to do if we're refinancing, we're gonna have to use 100,000 because there wasn't enough equity at that time. It was during the recession.
Right.
So I said, you're gonna have to take 100,000 from your retirement account to help pay off these debts, and you'll free up $50,000 a year, 4,200 a month. He said, yeah, but how am I gonna retire?
Mm.
I said, 100,000 to make 50,000 a year. That's a 50% ROI. That's amazing. Yeah, but how am I going to retire? Finally, it took his wife to say, honey, listen, you still have $400,000 sitting here. This
Mm.
makes sense. Do it. He did. And the cool thing is this, it's not just about the money you free up, it's about what it does for you here and emotionally.
Yeah.
Because he freed up that 50,000, just like I said. But then because he relaxed in his business, he showed up, he actually started closing more business. So he started making an extra 2,000 or 3,000 a month because he was relaxed. He didn't need the money. And you know how when people get when they're desperate, they push
Yeah.
away money. But
Yeah.
he was able to make more money that way. Another person, same thing. They came to us. Now they had millions of dollars in the stock market, but they said, I just want to figure out how to invest in real estate.
Mm.
And we just do passive investments. We're not really active investors. We just like to put our money with active investors and let them do all the work, right? And so they came to us about the real estate, but we looked at their numbers and said, listen, we could refinance your house, pay off some of these loans, free up $4,000 a month before we even invest anything. In fact, in their case, $0 out of pocket because they would just use the equity from their home to consolidate their debt, free up 4,000 a month. That's 50,000 a year. And then they still have millions they can invest passively. And so, and then not to mention on the accounting side, taxes, we found out we could save them over 30,000 a year. So, I mean, by the time all was said and done, if they want to invest all their stocks, which they haven't yet, boo, but they haven't invested all their stocks. If they did, they would actually improve their cash flow by 600,000 a year. That's $50,000 a month
Wow.
better than the situation was before.
That's unbelievable. That is fantastic. That's some fantastic case studies there. Is that, you're very, very good at presenting them. You obviously became really skilled in this. I love that. And it must be great for clients to work with you so that you can break through because you mentioned it. There's a lot of things that are correct that are just counterintuitive. They just don't feel right to us. What society
Mhm.
tells us, what the big bankers tell us, whoever it is, we get this stuff drilled into us. Debt is bad. Do it this way, do it that way, save up for your retirement, so on and so forth. It's really, really difficult. And I think a lot of the times, I don't know if you found this, that a lot of the times we think we are making decisions logically. We think they're these amazing, calm, logical creatures. Oh, yes, I decided that because I logically thought about it. But have you found that emotion is really tied up in these things? Because you mentioned some of those issues there where when someone's feeling desperate, there's a push effect. They're pushing away business, they're pushing away money and success. Is that a common thing that you see?
Oh, very common. In fact, I just did a podcast about it because
Ah,
I've watched people it technically escape the rat race. They're out of
mm,
the rat race. They're financially independent where they have enough passive income to pay all their bills, yet they don't feel free.
mm,
And the reason they don't feel free is because they never address the mindset issue first.
yeah.
A great book I'd recommend is called The Gap and the Gain by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan.
Mm,
Great book to talk about scarcity because that scarcity thinking, it doesn't matter what's in your bank account. It matters about how you feel about what's in that bank account or how you feel about your money. That
mm,
is probably one of the most destructive things because if you always focus on what you lack, you will always lack. You will always get more what you focus on.
yeah.
It's and vice versa. Whatever you ignore will leave you, right? For example, if you ignore your teeth, you'll lose them, right?
Yeah.
You ignore your spouse, you'll lose them. You ignore your kids, you'll lose them. You ignore your health, you'll lose it. Money's no different. You ignore your money, you'll lose it too. And so you want to make sure you pay attention to the things that you want to improve. And that includes your emotions. And I'll tell you, and sometimes it is logical, but logic doesn't matter because, for example, I had a client in the state of California. Now they had a rental property, and if you don't know anything about the West Coast of the United States, rental properties are horrible out here, right? Well, he had a rental property making $200 a month, but he had 700,000 of equity. Now we talk about return on equity, right? It's not just return on your cash, because he was looking at that from the past of, well, it used to be my house, I turned it into a rental, and it's great. I'm making
Mm.
200 bucks a month. And his whole goal was in 6 years, pay off the debt. So
Mm.
then he would cash flow 2,400 a month, or about 30,000 a year. I said, well, you could do that or sell this property, take the equity out, invest in other places like more of the Southeast United States, like Louisiana, for example, and
Mhm.
invest there and make a much higher return on your money.
Mm.
And he wouldn't do it. He's like, no, no, I can't. And my wife doesn't want to do it either. She loves this property. So they were emotionally attached to the property rather than looking at the logic of the numbers. Finally, 2 years later, he finally said, I think it's time to sell. Fortunately for him, the market didn't tank in the meantime. It didn't decrease, so he still had the equity. He sold the property. And just like clockwork, he emailed me just a few months ago, said, Chris, give you an update. I took that equity, invested in properties in the Southeast United States. And now my cash flow is over $100,000 a year,
Oh,
not
yes.
2,400 a year, but 100,000 a year. And he wouldn't have paid off that debt by this point. He would still have
Yeah.
been making 200 bucks a month. And even if he made 2,400 a month, that's not like him making 8,400 a month, right?
Yeah.
There's a big difference. So it's sometimes you have to break through those emotions and those old beliefs that, like you said, banks are the ones that taught us to pay off our debt. And you
Yeah.
wouldn't think they were the ones that teach us that. They think they would want us to have more debt, which they do, but they want you to pay it back faster. Like any good investor, they want their money back.
Mm.
Why? So they can reinvest it. That's why the shorter term loans have the lowest interest rate. The
Mm.
longer term ones have the higher interest rate because there's more risk for them. They want more principal back to turn that money and accelerate it faster. It's all about velocity and acceleration of money, where we've been trained by those same banks to accumulate our money and let it sit there, let it grow, set it and forget it. Don't look at it. Even if the
Yeah.
market goes down, don't look at it. You can wait another 15 years before that money comes back, right? Like what
Yeah.
happened in 2000. So those kind of things. Yeah, that's the lies that we bought into so that
Yeah.
the banks make more money. And by the way, if high risk really created high returns, why do banks take such little risk when they take your money? Because if
Yeah.
it were high risks, you put your money in the stock market, why do they always pull out their guaranteed fees whether you make money or not? They're always getting their fees because they take low to no risk and they let you gamble your money in the stock market and know that it's your life, not theirs. They'll make more money just by letting you set it and forget it. That's when you start to realize it's all a money play, it's all just a farce.
Yeah.
That's when you realize, like, I'm just being played by banks. Why don't I take control? Why don't I be the wise steward and invest my own money?
Yes, exactly. Oh, I love that. I love that. It's like the veil is, lifted from your eyes. But we need people like you to show us that, to pull that veil back. And let's look at it this way. And have you thought about it this way? And let's look at the numbers actually between the scenario you gave earlier with the car loan and so on and so forth. The cash flow index, that's a fantastic thing. I love the sound of that, the whole equation, because you're right. We always get taught these other stuff, return on investment, return on capital employed, so on and so forth. How did you personally come across that? Is it something you thought up? Is it something that came to you by doing things like, playing the cash flow game, but actually playing cash flow in your life as such? But how did that all unravel for you?
Yeah, I can't teach anything I don't do. I'm a horrible BSer. If I don't know about a subject, and I even told you about that before we went on the air, I said, I
Yeah.
hope we don't talk about European real estate because I know nothing other than talking to a few Europeans. I'm not the expert, right? And that's true. For me in my own life, I have to experiment with it. I have to test it and try it out. And so the same thing happened with me. The cash flow index happened because I was in debt and I was trying to figure out, where do I put my money? Do I invest it for cash flow or do I pay off certain debts? And which
Mm.
debt would I pay off if I invest in debt? And those kind of things. So that's where that index came from. Also
Right.
teaching it to other people. That's one thing too that helps me. The more I teach something, the better I master it.
Mm.
That's one thing you have to realize, that in scarcity, some people don't want to teach what they know. They think, hey, I've sacrificed for this. I've had to do this myself. I don't want to have to teach it. And I'm telling you, whatever gift you don't use, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And so I truly believe I want to master something and become better at something. The more I teach it, the better I get. That's how I became one of the top amateur ballroom dancers in the United States.
Ah,
Is I was, even though I wasn't as experienced as some of those people dancing since they were 3 years old, barely walking, I started dancing at 18, but by the time I was 22, I was competing at the national level with some of those same people. All because, unlike them, I actually loved teaching and sharing people what I had learned from professionals. And I would teach it, I would demonstrate it and do it myself and become better. And money is no different,
mm.
So yeah, that's how I learned those things, is just experiencing it myself and then having to figure out, well, what would I do? And then I teach it to other people as well.
That's fantastic. Ballroom dancing, a man of many talents. That's fantastic. And yeah, you're right. Teaching is, they say, that the deepest form of understanding. We can hear something or read something, okay, and then the next level, you can experience something. You've not just read a book about ballroom dancing. You've actually went and tried it, and you've tripped up, and then, oh, wait a minute, I need to lift my hands a bit higher, and so on and so forth. And then the next level, that master level, can you actually teach someone else what you've just learned? I love the fact that you've done that. Good man. You mentioned earlier the phrase financial independence, and it's always seems to be a thing that trips off the tongue, and a goal for someone to chase, and so on and so forth. And of course, the numbers will be different for all different people. You not only became financial independent once, you did it twice, didn't you?
Hmm. I did.
What on earth is the story there?
Yeah. So the first time I mentioned a little bit, right? And I had some help because I didn't just do some real estate investing, but I remember at the time I was a mortgage broker in 2006.
Right.
And one of my friends who was a real estate investor, he asked me, he said, if money were no longer an issue in your life, would you keep helping people get their mortgages?
Hmm.
And I said, well, I love teaching. Here comes that teaching thing again. I love teaching about the strategy of how to use the equity from your home to invest and pay off your mortgage. I said, but honestly, I hate paperwork. I can't stand it. And his idea was, well, why don't you find somebody who does like doing that? Now, in a scarcity brain, you think you have to do it all yourself because you can't share the wealth, right? You just got
Yeah.
to keep it all in and keep the full transaction and pay with yourself. But when he said that, it liberated me. I said, is there actually a nerd that likes doing paperwork? And he said, yes, there are people like that. And so I went to my broker and I said, hey, is there somebody in the company that fits this description? He said, yes, his name is Clark. Because if you have the name like Clark, you're going to be a nerd,
Come
right?
on.
I mean, even worse than him, even worse than Richard. I'm just kidding. No.
Oh.
So anyways, yes, Clark, I went to him and I said, listen, if I just give you clients, they're already ready to do it. I just want you to do all the work, the paperwork and everything. Would you do
Mhm.
that? And he said, yes. I said, great. Will you pay me 50% of that? Yes, I will. And so I would just spend a half hour or so with the client, teach them about the strategy of how to use the equity from your home to invest in real estate. And then they'd say, great, where should I get this mortgage? Talk to Clark. And as a
Right.
result, I was able to split and share on that deal. So I would spend maybe half hour or so with them, and then I get a check in the mail a few months later for $1,000 or $2,000. And I thought, well, that's dang easy. And I remember I
Yeah.
did that with a wholesale jeweler because at the time in my 20s, everybody was getting engaged or married. And so before they would go and buy an expensive ring at the mall, I would say, instead, go buy from a wholesale jeweler. You'll pay a third of the cost, you'll save money, and you can get it custom made. So they said, well, that's great. And so I sent them to that person. Now I get a 5% kickback. And so I was doing a combination of strategies. I was not only getting real estate passive income, but I was also getting money from just being a good person, hooking people up, with a couple companies. And so
Hmm.
between those two strategies, that's where I was able to make. I only needed about 3,500 a month at the time to live
Hmm.
on. Now, after I was back in the rat race in 2007 and 8, right?
Hmm.
I had to build from zero or even negative 1 million. I was $1 million more broke than the homeless person on the street. So I had to rebuild and it took more time. And I finally did it. Now I had to hit 10,000 a month to do that. But same kind of thing. I had to get back into real estate. I didn't just start buying real estate, but I even started lending my money out to real estate
Hmm.
investors, letting them take the money and then pay me a contractual return.
Hmm.
Even if it's like 1% a month. great, pay me that return. That means for every 100,000 I give you, I make $1,000 a month. And so I did the same thing again. It was December 2016. I was able to get to that point where I was technically financially independent, meaning I had enough income coming in, whether I worked or not, that would pay for my bills. And that's the key
Fantastic.
difference. There's financial independence and then there's financial freedom. Financial
Mm,
freedom and financial independence are not the same thing, because just
right.
paying your bills, just be able to survive, may
Hmm.
not feel like freedom to you. For most
Mm,
people, it's not. So I have two different numbers. There's financial independence, which is what does it take to pay my bills, which is a huge, huge accomplishment if you can get there.
hmm.
And then there's your freedom number, right? What's that number that gets you to feel free? So in my case, even if it was 10,000 a month, great, that paid the bills. But for me, a freedom number would be more like 20,000 a month, right? Or something like that. And
Yeah.
now, even with 8 children, between my wife and I from previous marriages, we've got 8 kids, it's more expensive. So for us, even though we make about 40,000 a month, even that we're like, okay, it's free, but man, kids are expensive. I'd have to be at least 25,000 a month to feel really free. And I know there's going to be somebody that will watch this and say, oh my goodness, you guys in the States are spoiled. That's so much. I can live on 2,000 a month,
Yeah.
3,000 a month. Great. That's fine. You may not have 8 children like I do. It's also different circumstances, different locations. That's
Mm,
fine. That's not the point of this. It's not the number. It's about what does it take for you to be free. And again, to go back to a previous point, there is no number by itself that will make you feel free. You have to
yeah.
work on your mindset
Yeah.
while you're working on your cash flow and your passive income along the way to really figure out what that true number is.
That's tremendous. Financial independence, financial freedom. That's really clever. I love that. Just words, of course, but it's the power behind them, it's the connotations behind them. And there's the other word again, feeling. How does it feel? And it's amazing.
Mhm.
You're actually making me think about my own kind of path as an investor, all those same things, all those little triggers about, oh, the fear of debt, and then the other side of it, the freedom of this passive income coming in. I can remember that having a mortgage on my own home, and that feeling, that pressure. Oh my goodness, there's debt, there's a mortgage, and then suddenly getting my first mortgage on the first portfolio, if you like, the first property I was renting out, and oh my goodness, what am I doing? It's another mortgage. Oh, it's more debt. Those feelings, scarcity. But then the first moment those payments started coming in the way, I went, wait a minute, I'm getting paid for this. I'm getting a passive
Mhm.
flow of money from this. This is incredible. And all of a sudden it flipped. It's an
Yep.
amazing change that we can go through. Now, when you are that person, you are that self-confessed entrepreneur. Do you believe everyone has to be an entrepreneur? Do you believe, no, you don't have to be that, but you should definitely be the steward that you mentioned earlier with your money? Do you believe everyone should be an investor with their money? Do you have to be an investor to be a good steward? What's your own kind of opinions on those subjects?
Yeah, not everybody has to be an entrepreneur, that's for sure. In fact, I think a lot of people aren't meant to be an entrepreneur. And that may
Right.
be unpopular with certain people, especially in the business space. But
Mm.
the truth is that for some people, they're just happy having a job.
Mm.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I think if that's the case, then your next best goal is to become more of an investor, right? Even if it's on the side. And it doesn't have to be an active investor. You could be a passive investor. Because what if the money you're bringing home, beyond just paying the bills, the extra you have, what if you could turn that money into passive income? And it gets you to the point where you show up to work, not because you have to, because you really truly want to. And I'm telling you, there's more and more, especially with the rising generations, more people don't care about retirement right now. They just
Yeah.
want to get to the point where they say, can I take off a month and be okay?
Yeah.
And then go back to work again. I want to just keep doing the work I do. Now, to do that kind of level of freedom, it might require you to have some sort of, either self-employment or entrepreneurism to do that.
Mm.
But I'll tell you this: here's the real secret to wealth, and it has nothing to do with real estate. This is what I learned that got me free in the first point: is there are principles that have worked since the beginning of time, eternal principles that always work when it comes to money, and it comes to this: is that dollars follow value.
Mhm.
Dollars follow the value you create for other people. That's true in the investing world too, right? For example, if I buy a real estate property, it's not about buying a house. It's about what kind of place can I provide that's of value to somebody else that they want to rent it.
Mm.
And so it's about the people. The people exchange money. Houses don't. Houses
Yeah.
don't pay you. People do.
Yeah.
So how can I bless people's lives? How can I benefit them? How can I create a win-win for them so that money is a natural byproduct of exchange, right? That it's just a natural receipt of service that you've rendered. When I started to shift my focus, that money wasn't about getting lucky. It wasn't about cheating somebody out of a deal, especially
Yeah.
when you're people doing wholesaling. That's always the accusation is that, oh, you're just trying to, get after people in need that are desperate, right? You're just trying to buy a property off people when they're desperate for money.
Yeah.
No, it's about creating a service and helping people out, giving them a win while you also get a win. And
Mhm.
so if you stop looking at the world as win lose, and instead, how can you create a win win? How can I serve somebody? How can I solve problems or add value in such a way that money is just a natural byproduct? If you approach life like that, money will no longer be mysterious. Money will be easy to make. So that's true whether you're a W-2, sorry, I say W-2, like a normal 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 employee,
Right.
or if you're somebody who's a business owner, it's always the same principle. So focus on how can I add more value? How can I improve? Even if you have a job and you feel like you can't control your income, I challenge you to do this. Go to your manager, go to your boss, whoever pays your bills, and ask them, say, what can I do for you that or the company that would merit me a raise, that would help me earn a raise? And just let them answer it.
Yeah.
And whatever they say, great, I'm going to go do that. And then you do it and they will give you raises. And I've had many clients do this. Some of them working for anything from just small mom and pop businesses to large banks, even big institutions. They've done this. And every time they make literally sometimes thousands of dollars more a month just by doing that one strategy. And then they don't just stop there, they keep doing it. They keep figuring out how can I keep serving them, adding value, solving problems for them so that they have to give me a raise or a promotion or whatever it might be. And even if they don't, even if the company takes advantage of you, someone else will come along saying, I need you in my business, right? I need you for me because I can see that you're a value creator. You come from that standpoint, money will be easy and you'll have more money to invest to then create more passive income. That's like for me been the main secret why from that point forward, really money has not been a big struggle.
That is fantastic. I definitely agree with your mindset. That's beautiful. Blessing people's lives, giving value, solving problems, and then the money just flows. That's a fantastic way of looking at things. It really is. Listen, I want to be respectful of your time. You've given so much content and value and insights today. I absolutely love it. I'm wondering the economy going forward, the globe, how things are going, because one of the skills you have is teaching people, entrepreneurs, investors, and so on, to survive through uncertain times and so on. I wonder where your own, crystal ball thoughts are at the moment, because there's so many people, so many forecasters, jumping on the airwaves and saying the biggest crash you've ever seen is going to come next year. Oh, no, no, the economy is going to turn the other way. Wait for these fantastic golden eras ahead of you. We never know what's going to happen. Now, I know you want us to be our own personal stewards and our own personal guardians of our money and investment, which makes perfect sense. But do you have any thoughts on the wider state of things?
Absolutely. I'm kind of as my shirt says, I got my Nike freak shirt that I bought at a marathon race once. Because it's true, I'm kind of a freak. And when it comes to the media, whatever the media says, pretty much do the opposite. So if they tell you that things are going to boom, it's probably going to bust. If they tell you it's going to bust, it might boom. Now it depends because I'll tell you, like here in the States, they talked about the economic soft landing, right? That we were going to go into recession, but you know what? We might have avoided it completely.
Hmm.
No, all happened was corrupt politicians kept printing more money, creating more debt in our country so
Mhm.
that we could just essentially it's just like, getting more credit cards, although they prove their own credit cards, which is a scary thing, but they're really just getting more credit cards to keep paying their bills. That doesn't
Yeah,
mean you can really truly pay the bills. At some point, that's going to come due.
yeah.
And so I really believe that the longer that you try to create things and the more money that the government pumped, especially post COVID, right? Oh my goodness, 2020, all the money they're pumping in the economy just created a bigger bubble. And the bigger the party, the bigger the hangover, right? And that's what I foresee coming. Now, I know people have been talking about that for a while, but again, if government keeps postponing or even increasing their debt to keep paying for things, it's going to make it look like we're okay. But
Hmm.
at some point, that bubble will have to burst. It's
Hmm.
just delaying the inevitable. So as a result, if I hear the media telling me I should go in the stock market, I will do the opposite. I will not go in the stock market, which I normally don't anyways, not anymore. And same thing with real estate. If they ever said real estate is the place to be, that's the time I'm going to sell off my real estate properties,
Yeah.
right? Or at least a lot of them. That's the difference, is that whatever the media says, they're already too late to the party. I know here in the United States, like I'm already gearing up for another little quick little boost because everybody, due to interest rates increasing so quickly in the United States, people haven't wanted to buy properties. So, but that doesn't mean that people won't buy properties. It just delays it. It just builds up this demand for people to buy properties. Now that interest rates have started to come down here in the United States, now it's ripe for a bunch of people to start jumping in, creating more bidding wars. And that's good for me as an investor. So trying to sell my properties, that's a good thing because now people are competing on price again. Now, on the flip side, if I buy now before everybody else starts jumping in, I'm getting a better deal that could give me instant appreciation in just the next 3 to 6 months. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, is that I see it's a great time to buy real estate, especially in the residential space. Commercial space, a little bit questionable here in the United States, but the residential space is really ripe to see another little mini boom.
Fantastic, fantastic stuff. Brilliant. Folks, you have heard today from the wonderful Mr. Chris Miles. Whenever it's safe to do so, go into the show notes. All the links are there, link off to this man's stuff, websites, podcasts, etc. But for the people listening right now, Chris, let's tell them what's the best way to follow you, to keep in touch with you. You've got your podcast, which is Money Ripples. That's correct. Yep.
That's
and
correct.
websites
we have the Money Ripples
stuff.
YouTube channel.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got almost 800 episodes on our podcast. So we're getting up there in years. We're on our 10th season right now. So we got the podcast. We also have moneyripples.com. Our handles on all social media is at Money Ripples. So you can follow us there too.
Great stuff. And you're still working with clients? Can people come to you directly and get some advice? Or that's possible as well. Yep. Fantastic.
We definitely work people's one-on-one to help them customize a game plan.
Tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Well, listen, for today, Chris, for everything you've done, all the value you've shared, the blessings that you've given to people, thanks a million.